with us on this Wednesday morning. Ed Schultz News and Commentary. Vladimir Putin said some very interesting things yesterday. He used the word revenge. He used the word restitution. Now, I find it hard to believe that Putin and Obama would gather at the negotiating table privately at the G20 and Putin not tell him what the Russian response is going to be. Because at that time, the Russians knew that their passenger airliner was taken down by the terrorists, by ISIL. And so what did the Russians do yesterday? They bombed indiscriminately without concern for civilians. Putin must have said, I'm going to go nail their ass. In the meantime, our Congress will not vote. It's been 16 months. They will not vote on giving the president the authorization of military force, and yet we're supposed to defeat ISIS. The Congress is standing in the way of progress. And the fact of the matter is that there are more target-rich environments right now with ISIL having the capability of hitting them. So Putin is possibly going to be our best friend in all of this. I would speculate, and there's been very little conversation in the media about, gosh, what did Obama and Putin actually talk about? I think Mr. President is a pragmatic man. We've seen that in negotiations, the way he's done health care, the way he did the automobile industry, and the way he's tried to deal with these obstructionists in Congress. He's always trying to get a deal. I would imagine that President Obama sat down with Putin and said, all right, look, let's forget Ukraine. Let's forget Crimea. Let's put aside who you want in power in Syria. We don't want Assad, you do. But let's find some common ground and let's go kick their ass. What do you say we work together when it comes to intelligence gathering? What do you say we work together when it comes to airstrikes on ISIS? And Putin probably said, yeah, I'm in for that. So if the president of the United States were to start bombing ISIS targets without concern for civilians, what do you think the conservatives in Congress would be saying? Wow, look at Obama. He's a murderer. And even the left would be all over the president. So the Congress needs to do what they're supposed to do, vote, to authorize the money and to authorize the authority for the president to go be the commander-in-chief so we don't have all these legal problems if innocent people get killed. If this is a war, which the French are saying it is, then we need to act like it's a war and be proactive. Part of being proactive is making sure the president of the United States has the authority to do what everybody wants him to do. So we move forward in the presidential debate. Gosh, what if Bernie Sanders was president? What would he do? Here's his thoughts.
What we have got to be, Katie, in my view, is not just strong and tough, but we have got to be smart. You will remember way back in 2002, the United States, President Bush said, well, we're going to be tough. We're going to go into Iraq. We're going to go into Afghanistan before that. And, it's not going to be very difficult. And we're just going to overthrow those governments and create a democratic society. And we'll bring our troops home. Didn't quite happen like that. We lost 6,700 brave Americans in that war. Hundreds of thousands of Iraqis died. And as a result of that invasion, we destabilized the entire region and, in fact, intensified extremism in that area. So we have got to be smart.
So being smart is doing what? Sitting down with the other superpower that has a hell of a lot to lose, just like us, and that would be the Russians. I maintain the fact the Russians can be our best ally in fighting ISIS. I maintain the fact that the Russians, they're not screwing around. And if Putin wants to use the word revenge, and if Putin wants to use the word restitution, that's right up the conservative alley, isn't it? Let's turn now to Steve Clemons, Washington editor-at-large for The Atlantic. Steve, good to have you with us today.
Good morning, Ed. How are you?
Good. I maintain the position that the Russians play a big card in defeating ISIS. And I think that this meeting between Putin and Obama at the G20 is huge. I mean, I wish I was a fly in the corner listening on that one. Despite the differences that we have, is this a chance? You've got the Russians out there bombing yesterday indiscriminately without concern for civilians. Putin is using the word revenge and restitution. Your thoughts on all this?
No, I think you're absolutely right. I think that we've had a very awkward relationship with the Russians for some time, from Crimea, Ukraine, differences over Bashar al-Assad. But now with one of our principal allies and the Russians themselves and what we saw happen in Lebanon, it has put us on the same side of the equation again. And they've got military capacity inside Syria, willing to deploy it ferociously. And I absolutely agree with you that the world sees much more unity of purpose going after ISIS now than they would have with the United States and Russia playing games with each other and pretending to go after ISIS. So it just seems to me that what's fallen into place is vital if ISIS is going to be really knocked back on a military front.
What about the United States and Russia collectively making a statement saying, NATO, you got to check in on this? What about that?
Well, I think it's important, and because I think a lot of the NATO states are, have come out of a point where their economies have been dismal. They're wary of further deepening entanglements. The Afghanistan entanglement of NATO was very uncomfortable and costly for many of them. But you don't get the luxury of picking when challenges pop up like this, and NATO's pretending like it can. Now with the attack in France, in Paris, with France invoking a never-invoked clause of the EU treaty that folks are sort of circling around cautiously. But yeah, I mean, I think with both the President of the United States and Russia calling on NATO to take more of a role, it's hard for NATO to sit on the sidelines.
Okay, we're seeing a new Putin now. We're seeing him react, should I say, in a very aggressive manner. I mean, he talks tough in the past, but damn it, he is going to get restitution and revenge for those innocent civilians, those Russians who were downed on that plane in the Sinai. Is this going to continue? I mean, what's your prediction on exactly how Putin's going to handle this in the long run?
There are different drivers now, Ed. I don't want to get too wonky for folks, but I think part of why Putin went into Syria was to protect Assad. Part of why he went in was to embarrass the United States. And part of why he went in is it would have been the first time in 42 years that Russia had been able to take any kind of military, muscular action in the Middle East, because the United States always preempted and left no space for Russia to be involved. Now Russia's involved in a big way in the Syria-Iraq mess, and it's also getting involved in Libya. And so there are drivers that have to do with the way Russia perceives its global prestige and what it wants to be involved in that are strategically important, that go beyond the revenge factor for what happened with the Russian airliner out of Egypt. But now he's chosen a course that if he did want to get out of it, he can't, because the Russian people see that their plane and innocent civilians were murdered with a bomb attack by ISIS on an airliner. And so much like a 9/11 incident, they have to now deepen their involvement and engagement. And I think one of the things that's important to remember is deepening an involvement engagement doesn't mean you're going to win, doesn't mean this is going to be an easy fight. And it could be what President Obama has always worried about, that there is a quagmire when you have a civil war with a proxy battle on top. It's complicated. So Russia is in the game, and it has nowhere to go but deeper into the game, because it's got real skin in this struggle now, and hundreds of its people have been killed. So it can't take another course. So that anger, that vengefulness that you're referring to, is essentially Putin with no other course.
Yeah. Your thoughts on how the authorization of the use of military force is going to go? The president asked for it 16 months ago. I think there's clearly an anti-Obama element playing out in Congress here, but now they're at a breaking point. They got to move on this. Your thoughts?
I hope they do, Ed, but I live in D.C. and I am just astounded by the continuing lack of adult behavior in Congress when it comes to these moments of major challenge. And I think that you've got one giant faction in the Democratic side that wants to see an AUMF go forward, but really wants to put heavy restraints on what that authorization allows. And then you've got others, mainly in the Republican side, but some Democrats, who want to see a much more robust authorization that does not tie the president's hands and constrict, if you will, the options for conducting a battle against ISIS. But after 9/11, there was a view that the authorization of use for force then just created too big a hole for everything to go through. And I don't see that battle between those factions ending. I don't see a clarity coming out of the Paris issue that would tie this up. So, I hope I'm wrong. It's one of the areas that I don't want to be right, but I don't see that fundamental knot getting untied right now.
Steve Clemons, always a pleasure. Good to have you with us. Appreciate your insight again. Thank you. You bet. Washington editor-at-large of The Atlantic, Steve Clemons. When we come back, more talk on the authorization of use of military force and also the Syrian refugees, how the Republicans are playing this and how it plays into the immigration debate in this country. It's all coming up on Ed Schultz News and Commentary. Stay with us. Hey, folks, you've heard me talk about BioGreen Clean. I'm going to show you right now on my airplane just how tough this is. I want you to keep in mind, chemical-free, 100% plant-derived, biodegradable. It is the safest cleaner that you can get, and it's the most effective. Go to our website, wegoted.com, or go to biogreenclean.com. www.biogreenclean and order today. It's time to continue our conversation about mechanical insulation. Mechanical insulation is for the piping systems in our nation's commercial and industrial facilities. Facility owners are burning up billions of dollars through the lack of mechanical insulation on these piping systems. Call the iSave team. Insulation saves America valuable energy, and this team of energy conservation specialists is shovel-ready to save you money. Visit iSaveTeam.org to have a specialist give your plant an energy audit.
We perpetuate a culture of crime all the way from Wall Street right down to the main street in our hometowns. It's worse than it has been since FDR took control of the problem and said we can't count on industry taking care of the American labor. They probably have already engaged into some type of criminal cover-up, and the law prohibits the government from even doing anything about it.
Catch America's lawyer Mike Papantonio on YouTube at youtube.com/GoLeftTV.
Subscribe to the Ed Schultz podcast today. Simply log on to iTunes, search for Ed Schultz, and click the subscribe button to have the show delivered to your preferred listening device daily, free of charge. Rate and review the podcast to tell us how we're doing. More details at wegoted.com.
Communication Workers of America, Alliance for American Manufacturing, BioGreen Clean, and the iSave team bring you this production Monday through Friday. Thanks for the video view, the download, like us on Facebook. All right. Do we bring in Syrian refugees to America? What are we talking about? Is there a possibility that there could be a terrorist or an ISIS member that could slip through the cracks? The truth? Probably not. But this is now the new front and the new assault on immigration and defending the country by the conservatives. And it's very interesting, soft language that's being used by the Speaker of the House. This is what Paul Ryan is saying. This is his position on this. We need to take a pause in this program. Here it is.
It's important that we have a refugee system in place. We respect that. But we think it's simply prudent that for this particular program, in this particular situation, that we be better guarded against any possible infiltration of ISIS coming through this program. That is why we think it's necessary to have a pause and to have a more comprehensive strategy dealing with guaranteeing that we do not allow ISIS members coming here.
He goes on to say that we need to be safe than sorry. Well, you can connect that to gun violence in this country. Background checks. Say that to the families that have lost loved ones due to gun violence in this country. And how many background checks, if we had it in this country, how many lives would that save? But, of course, that's another issue. But the soft language that's being used, that we're going to have a pause in this refugee program, I don't believe that for a moment. I think they want to eliminate it. I think if they could round up every Muslim and shove them the hell out of the country, that's exactly what the Republicans would do. The Syrian Muslim refugee cleansing is what it should be called, because that's exactly what the Republicans want. The president called them out on it.
These are the same folks oftentimes who suggest that they're so tough that just talking to Putin or staring down ISIL or using some additional rhetoric somehow is going to solve the problems out there. But apparently they're scared of widows and orphans coming into the United States of America as part of our tradition of compassion. Now, first they were worried about the press being too tough on them during debates. Now they're worried about 3-year-old orphans. That doesn't sound very tough to me.
Take a look at this picture. This is what we're talking about. We're talking about refugee camps that are already in place. These are people who are fleeing terrorism. These are people who are fleeing ISIS. These are women and children. And the Republicans are saying, well, you know what? We got to have a pause to this program. They're even going to go so far to connect it to the defense authorization budget and draft language to stop the Syrian refugee program. It takes 18 to 24 months for any of them to get into the country. For more on this, let's turn to Gregory Meeks, Democrat from New York. He's a member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Congressman, good to have you with us.
Good to be with you.
Your thoughts on what's unfolding on this issue in Congress?
Well, clearly, I think that individuals who are talking about not allowing the refugee process to continue are taking us back to a day that, and part of American history that we should have learned from. When you talk about trying to make sure that the most vulnerable of individuals who were victimized by the same kind of evil that ISIS is doing in Syria and other places, and those individuals, we should be after careful vetting, and we have the most rigorous vetting system that there is, leading the world and showing that we are not going to exclude people because of their religion, as Mr. Cruz have said, or because of where they're from, Syria. That's not who we should be, and that's not what we should do. You know, I'm reminded of the Japanese in this country. In a history, out of fear, people went around and put American citizens who were Japanese in concentration camps for a while. We don't want to do that. We should not. We should be better than what we were, and I think that we are. And I compliment the president for standing and continuing to do what he's doing to try to make sure that we stop ISIL, but also, as we tell others to take in some of the Syrian refugees, so should we.
What message does this send to ISIS? Does this give them propaganda ammunition to make their case that America is evil and that we want to separate? I mean, that's basically where they're going.
Absolutely. It is the absolutely wrong message to send, and it helps ISIS recruit, because ISIS says, hey, see what we tell you? The American people, they don't want you. The American people are not tolerant individuals. Come with us. They're evil individuals. They are separatist individuals. So the message that some of these presidential candidates are sending out is very helpful to ISIS. It helps them recruit. It helps them to get individuals who already feel disaffected and who have not been, as in the case of some in Europe, who have not been part of that culture and society in the way, or integrated into it. It is exactly the wrong message that we want to send.
So, Congressman, does this play into the defense authorization bill, or is there troubled waters ahead on this?
Well, I think that, and I'm.
What are they going to do, basically?
You know, I think that the president is going to continue to move, and I think that as information, I've got to hope that as information gets through to members of Congress, we had which I can't talk about completely, but we had a classified meeting that was basically, the room was packed with Democrats and Republicans, all of the individuals from the various enforcement agencies, whether it's from the Defense Department or the Department of State or the FBI, the Homeland Security, to get the facts out to individuals so that they understand really what the deal is. And hopefully that people then will not play politics, because that's my concern. I know that's clearly what these presidential candidates, they're trying to play politics in a scenario that is too serious.
Do you get a sense that the Republican-controlled House is rushing to a vote on this?
Well, I think that I do get that sense. There's some that want to rush to a vote to try to halt this process, and that would be exactly the wrong thing. But I also get the sense and know that any such bill would be vetoed by the president and would not be overridden.
Okay.
So I'm confident of that.
Gregory Meeks, Congressman from New York. Good to have you with us on Ed Schultz News and Commentary. Thanks so much.
Always good to be with you, Ed.
You bet. He's a member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee and has had a security briefing on all of this. So both sides of the story coming out. When we come back, we're going to talk about the defense authorization bill, but also the authorization to use military force. This has been in the works for 16 months, and the president has warned about the growth of ISIS, and he has talked about his strategy to contain them. That conversation next. Stay with us. We're right back.
From the steel mills of Pennsylvania, to the auto factories of Michigan, to the modern makers movement, manufacturing makes our nation great. I'm Scott Paul, president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing. We bring business and labor together to advocate for policies that everyone can agree on. Together, we can strengthen manufacturing and create good-paying American jobs. Help us keep it made in America.
The Ed Schultz Internet broadcast is brought to you by the Ring of Fire radio show. Listen to the Ring of Fire weekends on radio stations across the country. Get more information and the news of the day at ringofireradio.com.
Good to have you with us here on Ed Schultz News and Commentary. Why doesn't the president have the authority he asked for to use military force against ISIL? It's been in the Congress for 16 months. That's kind of fallen by the wayside, hasn't it? Yes, it was John McCain from Arizona and Senator Tim Kaine of Virginia, who 16 months ago stepped to the plate and says, we got to give the president the tools to do what he has to do to defeat ISIS. This is Kaine on the Senate floor yesterday.
This threat is mutating and growing, and at the end of last week, on Friday the 13th, we saw the horror of ISIL with the grim assassination of innocents as they were enjoying dinner or going to music concerts or watching soccer games in Paris. ISIL put out a video a few days ago threatening similar attacks on Washington. ISIL's not going away. This is a threat, and the president started military action for a narrow and limited reason, but the threat has mutated. Like a cancer, it's grown, and it is now affecting nations all over the world. And so the question is, how long will Congress continue to be silent about this?
Well, that is a great question, and that's what the American people want to know. I think that there clearly is an anti-Obama element playing out here by the Republicans, that they don't want to see this president have any measurable success whatsoever, and they want to leg up on national security and immigration come election cycle. Well, here we are. Let's go to Congressman Alan Grayson, who's a member of the Progressive Caucus, Democrat from Florida. Congressman, good to have you with us.
Thank you, Ed.
What do we do here? Why doesn't the president have this force, and do you think he needs this authorization?
Ed, respectfully, I did listen to your introduction, but this is one of those very rare moments when I have to disagree with you.
That's what I want to hear.
It is true that a lot of the animus the Republicans have toward the president has figured into the failure to pass a war authorization. But the fundamental reason why we haven't passed one is because the president hasn't come up with a valid plan to actually defeat ISIS. If the president had that authorization, he'd be doing exactly what he's been doing up to this point, which has been entirely ineffective. I have suggested in the alternative that we help to gather together a local Arab Sunni force on the ground to defeat ISIS. Neither the State Department or the president has shown much interest in that plan, even though local countries have agreed to contribute troops to it. That's what we need to do. That has nothing to do with the authorization of the use of military force. It's true that when we look on our TV screens and on our computers and we see horrific acts, we feel like we need to do something. But we need to do the right thing, not just something. And the fact of the matter is that we can't go and bomb every time we see something bad happen in the world. That's not going to stop it from happening. We need valid proven plans, and we haven't seen one yet.
So, Congressman, you think that there are countries in the Arab world that are willing to codify and go after ISIS, and we're somewhat standing in the way of that?
Yes. In fact, that's exactly what's happening. The Egyptians are willing to send troops. The Turkish government's willing to send troops. What they want is the United States to stop blocking that effort, because the United States clings to this idea that we can somehow conjure up a free Syrian army, and that we can somehow put the Humpty Dumpty of Iraq back together again. The United States has told all the countries in the region that only the United States forces should be foreign forces in these countries, not anyone else's forces. And we've actively prevented the Arab League from coming together and dealing with this joint threat.
So it sounds like that the administration's plan all along has been to unseat Assad, and that will be the linchpin to defeating ISIS. Clearly, we're seeing that ISIS is outside the borders of Syria, and these attacks, these 3 attacks in the last several weeks, which no one predicted, and there was no intel on it, and they just happened. Is this, in your opinion, a game changer?
Well, the Turks claim they did have intel on it, and I don't know for a fact whether it's true or not, because I haven't seen our intel yet. It might well be a game changer, but let's face it, the French reaction doesn't seem to come up with anything that's any more effective than what our military has done up to this point. It's ridiculous to think that dropping 34 bombs on Raqqa is going to turn the tide of that war. There are ground troops needed. I don't think they should be our ground troops. I think they should be local ground troops that understand the language, understand the religion, understand the customs, and are not seen as an occupying foreign force. That's what needs to happen. As far as I can see, that's the only winning plan to defeat ISIS, and an authorization for the use of military force would not change that chemistry at all.
And what about the Russian dynamic? Now that they have stepped up airstrikes in response to their innocent civilians being brought down on that passenger liner in the Sinai, where does this take us? Well,
it's the same basic failed idea that you could win a war against an irregular non-army from the air. These are people who don't wear uniforms. They don't march in formation. They don't have tanks. They don't have airplanes. It's a different kind of war. And we can't use 19th century tactics against that kind of 21st century irregular non-army. We need a new approach.
This is Senator Jeff Flake on the Senate floor from Arizona talking about the defense, talking about the authorization for the use of military force.
It's our responsibility. We are the Article I branch. We're the branch that is supposed to declare war. And we need to do that here. It's time. It's well past time that we move on this. And hopefully the events of the past couple of weeks, the attacks that happened in Paris, the bombing of a plane, the other suicide bombings that have occurred, our commitment of new resources will convince us all that it's time to act here in Congress.
Your response to that, Congressman?
Well, it's interesting that our neoconservatives are the folks who are in favor of any war, anywhere, anytime, any place, want us to go to war, when in fact the French haven't even asked us to do that. The NATO treaty has a specific provision in it to actually make that a request. It's under Article 4 of the treaty, and the French have not invoked Article 4. So why are we anxious?
That of course would force the 28 member nations of NATO to respond to that request, to basically weigh in on what they see their involvement, correct?
Yes, so if the French don't want us to go to war, then why are we going to war on their behalf? Why are we going around the world trying to do everyone else big favors when we don't seem to get that treatment from any one of them?
Interesting take. Congressman Alan Grayson, always great to visit. Appreciate your time today. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much.
Next up, Ben Carson, who is a total idiot when it comes to the Middle East. I don't know how else to phrase it. I don't know how else to position it. Talk about getting stuck in the mud and sinking further. The guy has no clue what he's talking about. He has no intelligence background whatsoever or information to support what he is doubling down on, that China has involvement in the Middle East. Listen to this.
The Syrians have sophisticated Chinese weaponry. That's the basis of it. And that sophisticated Chinese weaponry requires support in order to utilize it.
And where are you getting that information from? Who's been advising you on that matter?
My advisors. I have advisors who are former military people and advisors who are former CIA people.
He's talking about an 83-year-old guy who was advising him. And now, of course, the New York Times has come out saying that, that guy's totally out of the loop. Carson doesn't know what he's talking about. But did you hear what he said? There's Chinese military hardware in the Middle East. The White House needs to put this to bed once and for all. I know that Susan Rice made a comment on it earlier this week, but it's would be more than apropos to have it happen again. Now, this is Armstrong Williams, who apparently is a close associate and advisor to Ben Carson, defending him on these ridiculous accusations about what's unfolding in the Middle East.
Dr. Carson was very dismissive of the question. He did not think it was a question because it was hypothetical. And Dr. Carson doesn't like answering hypotheticals. And so he intentionally did not answer the question. And why I know that, because I had an extensive discussion with him earlier this morning about the Fox interview.
What did he say?
He said he was very dismissive. He just thought it was a silly question. And I said to him, I said, look, when you're on these national forums as well as in the debates, when they ask these questions, while you may think they're silly, if you don't answer them, people may think that you don't know the answer, in which you've been asked that question 100 times and we know you know the answer. The landscape of foreign policy, the country, and the dynamics are changing every day. The bottom line, on any given day, any of these candidates can be asked a question about foreign policy that they could not answer.
Okay, hold on. I've had enough. First of all, Armstrong Williams has got a shaky past from the Bush administration. I don't have time to get into that, but he is basically a loser. The dynamic in the Middle East is changing from day to day. Now, what does that mean? Does that mean that the Chinese have their military hardware in there on Monday, but on Tuesday it's gone, and then it's back on Wednesday, and they might keep it over for the weekend? This is crazy. And the fact that the mainstream media in this country is just coddling this Ben Carson is outrageous. He's an idiot. He doesn't know what's going on in the Middle East, and he's digging himself deeper into a hole. Enjoy the show, Republicans. Ed Schultz, News and Commentary. We're back tomorrow.
Perfect.
Huh?
That's perfect. That's perfect.
It's changing from day to day.
Oh, man.